If you truly want to govern a country, you must never shy away from any sacrifice you would ask of your soldiers." With these words, Ibrahim Traore would, the very next morning, disguise his identity and personally join the raid on Burkina Faso's most dangerous terrorist camp. The Situation Room in the underground level of the presidential palace in Ouagadougou fell silent as Ibrahim Traore studied the satellite images spread before him. The president of Burkina Faso, still in his mid-30s, had the intense focus of someone who had spent most of his adult life in military operations. "How many civilians are being held?" he asked, not looking up from the images. General Ouedraogo cleared his throat. "At least 40, Mr. President. Mostly women and children from the villages of Solhan and Tadarat. Intelligence suggests they're being used as human shields." The terrorist camp lay in a remote area of northern Burkina Faso near the Mali border. For years, it had been a staging ground for attacks on villages, military outposts, and mining operations. 3 previous attempts to neutralize it had failed, resulting in significant military casualties and no decisive victory. Defense Minister Traore spoke next. "The camp is well defended, sir. They have heavy weapons, likely supplied by remnants of Libya's arsenal. Lookouts positioned on the surrounding ridges. Multiple escape routes." Traore nodded slowly, his expression revealing nothing of his thoughts. "And the hostages are kept here?" He pointed to a cluster of structures on the northwestern edge of the camp. "Yes, sir, according to our intelligence." Traore straightened, making eye contact with each of the 6 military leaders gathered in the room. These were his most trusted commanders, veterans who had fought alongside him before he became president. "I've made a decision," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Operation Desert Hawk will proceed tomorrow at 200 hours. Special Forces Team Alpha will lead the insertion. The primary objective remains the same: secure the hostages, then neutralize the camp." The commanders nodded. This was expected. What Traore said next was not. "I will personally accompany Team Alpha." The silence that followed was absolute. Then, all at once, voices erupted. "Mr. President, that's impossible. The risk is unacceptable. Security protocols expressly forbid." Traore raised his hand, and the protests immediately ceased. "My decision is final. I will not ask our forces to undertake risks I am unwilling to share. This operation is too important to delegate entirely. I need to see firsthand what our troops face in the field." General Ouedraogo, the most senior officer present, and Traore's former commander, stepped forward. "Sir, with the utmost respect, you are no longer just a soldier. You are the head of state. Your capture or death would be a strategic disaster for our nation." Traore's expression softened slightly. "I understand your concern, General, but consider the message this sends, not just to our enemies, but to our own people and forces. A leader who fights alongside his men earns a different kind of authority than one who directs from afar." He turned to the topographic map of the target area. "I won't be in nominal command of the operation. That remains Captain Zeta's responsibility. I'll be there as an observer and participant, not to override tactical decisions in the field." Defense Minister Traore, who had served with Traore for years before his ascension to the presidency, knew that look in his leader's eyes. The decision was indeed final. He shifted gears. "Then we must establish strict protocols, sir. Communications, extraction priorities, contingencies." Traore nodded. "Agreed. And this remains absolutely classified. No one outside this room is to know of my participation until after the operation is complete. The official record will show that I'm conducting an overnight visit to the eastern provinces." The meeting continued for another 2 hours as they refined the operational details. When it concluded, Traore asked General Ouedraogo to remain behind. Once they were alone, the older man spoke with the frankness that only their decades-long relationship permitted. "Ibrahim, this is unnecessary. You have nothing to prove. Traore moved to the window that looked out onto the palace gardens, currently bathed in late afternoon sunlight. This isn't about proving anything, old friend. It's about understanding. How can I make decisions that send our young men and women into danger, if I've forgotten what that danger feels like? He turned back to face the general. Besides, there's something about this camp that doesn't add up. 3 failed operations against a fixed position. Our forces are better than that. I need to see for myself what we're missing. The general studied him for a moment. You suspect something? Perhaps. Reports indicate increasing sophistication in their tactics. New weapons appearing that we can't trace. Someone is supporting them, and I want to know who. As night fell, over Ouagadougou, Traore sat alone in his private quarters writing letters. One to his sister, recently discovered and brought to safety after years of separation. One to his closest advisor, containing instructions to be followed if he did not return. The third, addressed to the people of Burkina Faso, he sealed in an envelope marked, "To be opened only in the event of my death." Just after midnight, he changed from his formal attire into standard military fatigues, without insignia or rank. A knock at the door signaled the arrival of his security chief. "The transport is ready, Mr. President. Team Alpha is preparing at the staging area." "Thank you, Cabaret. Remember, absolute secrecy. As far as anyone knows, I'm asleep in my quarters and not to be disturbed until morning." The journey to the northern military base was made in a nondescript vehicle with darkened windows. No presidential motorcade. No formal protocols. Upon arrival, Traore was immediately escorted to a secure hangar where 24 members of Special Forces Team Alpha were conducting final equipment checks. Captain Zeta, the team commander, approached and offered a crisp salute. "Mr. President, while I respect your decision, I must formally state my objection to your participation in this mission." Traore returned the salute. "Objection noted. Captain, now brief me on the final approach plan." For the next hour, he was integrated into the team's preparation. Though it had been some years since his active combat days, Traore's muscle memory returned quickly as he checked his equipment, reviewed hand signals, and studied the latest intelligence updates. The team would insert via helicopter, landing 5 kilometers from the target to avoid detection. From there, they would proceed on foot through rough terrain, approaching the camp from the east, where the rocky landscape provided the best cover. At 1:30 hours, the team boarded 2 Black Hawk helicopters. As the aircraft lifted off into the night sky, Traore felt a familiar sensation, the focused calm that precedes combat. Around him, the Special Forces operators maintained professional silence, though he could sense their mixture of pride and concern at having their president among their ranks. The flight was kept low to avoid radar detection. No words were exchanged over the intercom except essential communications. At the designated drop point, the helicopters touched down just long enough for the teams to disembark before disappearing back into the night sky. Under a moonless sky, Team Alpha began their approach march. Traore, positioned in the middle of the formation, moved with the practiced quiet of a veteran soldier. Night vision equipment revealed the harsh landscape, rocky outcroppings, sparse vegetation, dry stream beds, the kind of terrain that had defined Burkina Faso's northern borders for centuries. 2 hours of careful movement brought them to the ridge overlooking the terrorist camp. Captain Zeta signaled for the team to take observation positions. Traore settled beside him, using high-powered binoculars to study the layout below. The camp was larger than the satellite images had suggested. Multiple structures formed concentric circles around a central area. Armed sentries patrolled the perimeter, but their pattern seemed irregular, almost haphazard. "Something isn't right," Captain Traore whispered. "Those guards aren't maintaining proper security protocols. Look at their movements." Zeta observed for several moments. "You're right, sir. They're too casual, too confident. As if they're not expecting an attack, Traore finished the thought. Or they're prepared for one, Zeta concluded grimly. Traore felt a chill that had nothing to do with the pre-dawn desert air. Change of plans. I want thermal scanning of the entire perimeter, and send 2 men to check that ridge to the north. There should be a sentry post there, but I'm not seeing any movement. While they waited for the scouts to return, Traore continued his observation. The cluster of buildings where intelligence indicated the hostages were being held showed no signs of activity, no guards, no movement, no light. When the scouts returned 20 minutes later, their report confirmed his suspicion. No hostiles on the northern ridge, sir. But we found this. The soldier handed Zeta a small device, who then passed it to Traore. It was a sophisticated motion sensor, European manufacturer. Not the kind of equipment typical terrorist groups in the region had access to. And the thermal scan? Traore asked. Something's wrong, sir, replied the team's technology specialist. I'm getting cold spots where there should be heat signatures. The hostage buildings, they're empty. Traore's mind worked rapidly, connecting pieces. It's a trap. They knew we were coming. He turned to Zeta. Abort the mission. Get the team back to the extraction point immediately. Before Zeta could relay the order, a blinding light suddenly illuminated the ridge where they were positioned. The roar of vehicles and shouts in several languages, including French, echoed through the night. Ambush! Zeta called out, but it was too late for a clean retreat. The next few minutes were chaos. Automatic weapons fire erupted from multiple positions below. Team Alpha responded with disciplined counterfire, but they were outflanked and outnumbered. Fall back to position Echo, Zeta commanded, referring to a defensive location they had identified during planning. Protective formation around the HVT, the high-value target, Traore. As the team began their tactical withdrawal, Traore found himself at the center of a moving perimeter of Special Forces operators. His combat training kicked in automatically. Move low, move fast. Return fire only when necessary to conserve ammunition. They had covered perhaps 200 meters when an explosion rocked the ground ahead of them. The blast was followed by a barrage of heavy machine gun fire that cut off their planned escape route. They've anticipated our fallback position, Zeta shouted over the din. We need to split up. Traore knew the captain was right. A single large group was too easy to target. Do it, he confirmed. 3 teams will rendezvous at the secondary extraction point. Zeta quickly divided the unit. Team 1 with the President. Teams 2 and 3 provide diversionary fire, then separate withdrawal routes. As the teams prepared to split, Traore made a decision. I'm going with Team 3. Zeta looked stunned. Sir, protocol dictates. Protocol won't matter if none of us make it out, Traore cut him off. They'll expect me to be with the largest group or the best protected one. Team 3 has the most difficult extraction route. They'll be looking for me the least there. Before Zeta could protest further, Traore continued. This isn't a request, Captain. Team 3. Now. Minutes later, Traore was moving through the rocky terrain with just 5 operators. The sounds of intense firefights echoed from where Teams 1 and 2 were creating the diversion. The ruse seemed to be working. No pursuit had yet materialized behind them. The team leader, Lieutenant Sankara, led them through a dry stream bed that offered cover from both sight and fire. They moved in silence, communicating only through hand signals. Traore kept pace, his breathing controlled despite the exertion and tension. After nearly an hour of evasive movement, they reached a small cave that had been identified in pre-mission planning as a potential safe house. Lieutenant Sankara posted 2 men as lookouts, while the rest of them took refuge inside. Status report, Traore requested once they had established temporary security. Teams 1 and 2 have both reported successful disengagement, Sankara informed him after checking his secured communications device. They're proceeding to separate rally points. 2 casualties reported, 1 minor, 1 serious, but stable. And the hostages? Any confirmation? Sankara's expression darkened. Negative, sir. Captain Zeta conducted a remote thermal scan of the entire camp during withdrawal. No. Civilian heat signatures detected. It appears the hostage situation was fabricated to lure us in. Traore absorbed this information with a grim nod. His suspicion had been correct. The entire operation had been compromised from the start. But how? And by whom? The lieutenant continued. Sir, we've analyzed the weapon signatures from the ambush. Not standard terrorist arsenal. We identified French famous rifles and what sounded like Belgian FN Minimus European weapons. Traore mused. In the hands of supposed regional terrorists. Interesting. He moved to the mouth of the cave, peering out at the lightening horizon. Dawn was approaching. Did you get visual confirmation of any of the attackers? Yes. Sir, mixed group, local fighters, but also several Caucasian individuals. Military bearing, not contractors. The pieces were falling into place, special forces, French most likely, possibly with Belgian support. He turned back to Sankara. This wasn't a terrorist trap. This was a state-sponsored operation. The realization hung heavy in the air. This wasn't just an attempt to eliminate a troublesome terrorist cell. It was an attempt to eliminate him, the president of Burkina Faso. A president who had recently nationalized foreign-owned gold mines, expelled foreign military bases, and begun charting an independent course for his resource-rich nation. Communications check, Traore ordered. I need to speak to Defense Minister Traore immediately. While one of the operators established a secure connection, Traore considered his options. The presence of European Special Forces operators on Burkina soil without authorization, conducting what appeared to be an assassination attempt disguised as a counter-terrorism operation. This was an act of war. Yet direct confrontation with former colonial powers was not a battle Burkina Faso could win through conventional means. This would require a different approach. When the connection to the Defense Ministry was established, Traore spoke concisely. Minister. Traore, Operation Desert Hawk was compromised. European Special Forces present at the target site. Prepare Protocol Sunlight immediately. Authorization code Sankara 7 Delta. Protocol Sunlight was a contingency plan developed for exactly this scenario, irrefutable evidence of foreign military intervention on Burkina soil. It involved immediate diplomatic, media, and military responses, all carefully calibrated to expose the violation without escalating to open conflict. Understood, Mr. President, came the minister's voice, tight with concern. Are you secure? Affirmative. Proceeding to Extraction Point Delta with Team 3. Expected arrival, 0730 hours. Sir, backup forces are standing by. Should we deploy? Traore considered this. Negative. The engagement is over. They've withdrawn. This was a targeted operation. After ending the communication, Traore addressed the team. We move in 10 minutes. New mission parameters. Collect evidence. I want shell casings, equipment, anything the attackers left behind. Documentation is now as important as extraction. As they prepared to move out, Lieutenant Sankara approached him. Sir, permission to speak freely? Always, Lieutenant. What you did tonight, choosing to come on this mission, it was either the bravest or the most foolish thing I've ever seen a commander do. The young officer paused. But I understand why you did it now. You suspected a trap. Traore nodded. Not specifically this trap, but something felt wrong about the intelligence. Too convenient, too precise. When information seems too good to be true. In our line of work, it usually is, Sankara finished. The team moved out at first light, carefully backtracking toward the ambush site. The attackers had withdrawn, as Traore had predicted. They collected spent shell casings, abandoned equipment, and, most valuably, clear boot prints that matched NATO standard military issue. By mid-morning, they had reached the extraction point, where a helicopter waited to return them to Ouagadougou. As they lifted off, Traore looked down at the harsh landscape below. thinking of the centuries of foreign intervention that had shaped his country's history. Today was supposed to have been another chapter in that long story, the elimination of a troublesome African leader who dared to reclaim his nation's resources. Instead, it would become a turning point,